But this is still not necessarily a craft like that you can, say, pursue through a college course. You might be able to go to school for the mechanics or the engineering, that kind of thing, certainly, but very much still an apprentice-style learning situation
Absolutely.
where I'm learning from somebody who has decades of experience. You and I have talked a lot about situations where it's like you said, it's not necessarily a popularity contest, but I think in that apprentice situation, and I've seen this happen in cultures too, where like sometimes, somebody's got to somehow size you up and figure out, is this person worth my time, right?
Right.
All the things that I've had to, put in the time and energy, we call the blood, sweat, and tears to get to that point. Am I willing to put some of that back into that person? I know you've mentioned to me personally, but are there some people off the top of your head that when you look back, you go, wow, if that person had not happened into my life at that point, would I be doing what I'm doing? People who made a great impact in your life, specifically in this profession.
In this profession, I'll start off by saying you, because a number of years ago, I remember being in a venue and having no idea how to set up a frame for a projector screen. And you coming in there and just being like, all right, stupid, keep it simple. Let's do this. So as a greenie in AV, I think you helped me a lot there. I think that
I wasn't fishing for that, folks.
I think we had a great relationship here, and I grew from that, having worked at a local theater that has such history. I think Randy Dempsey, who's out of Macon, Georgia, was the one who started me on the Chitlin circuit and started me on all of those venues. And he was very hard on me, had a lot of tough love for me, but I think I'm much better off for it. And definitely threw me into the fire a number of times, as I said, like that first time. But I learned from it, and I think I'm tougher than other people for it.
Yeah, I got you. So that apprentice style education, like, does it take a certain mentality? Like you talk about kind of the tough love and things like that. Everybody's wired up a little different. And the pressure, I think, sometimes of the deadline can bring out some interesting dynamics in the work environment. How did you deal with some of that? I mean, you talked a little bit about, that door gets locked and shut behind you and you got to take those steps and go out there and do it. But like other times where like you're building that competency and you thought you did all right, but then your mentor's like, hey kid, you still got a lot to learn, kind of thing.
Rolling it back a couple more years before rigging, I thought really prepared me for it. I was working with an excellent gentleman and mentor of mine, Mercury, with the Gypsy Theater Company. At the time was operating out of the Buford Community Theater. I was apprenticing under him. He was my master carpenter, and I was apprentice carpenter. And I remember one day when I thought that I had gotten into the groove, I thought that I had learned enough to be proficient in the field, and I was a good carpenter. I could do things for stage. I showed up to a gig one day that he told me to be there at 10 a.m., and I called him and asked him where he was because he wasn't there. And he said, oh, today we're hanging electrics. And I said, I'm not an electrician. I've never done this before. And he said, yeah, that's the point. And he hung up on me. So I being behind the curve of everybody else that was there that was an electrician, I had to become up to snuff, and I had to learn by osmosis, which a lot of the old school people believe in that method. Now, you do have a lot of college courses. You do have a lot of things that can get you up to speed. I think there's something to be said for that apprenticing method that is still very valid and still very relevant, even if it's not the primary method.
Right. I mean, we've both been through some higher education and things like that. And I think there's always value in that. But I think
Always.
the coupling of the learning of the theory and then putting that into some sort of immediate practice. And then I think that there's a huge amount of value that comes from, we always talk about not overselling yourself and promising things that you can't deliver on. But there is a certain amount of, I know being as a technical director, if somebody comes to me and I ask them, say, hey, have you ever hung lights before? And they go, no, but I'm willing to try. Depending on what I know about that particular event or the timeline we're up against, if I feel like I've got the time to put in and that, again, I'm sizing this person up and going, hey, they're willing to learn, I'm willing to put some time and effort in this person. There's a huge payoff that I think happens on both sides of that relationship, both the apprenticed person and the apprentice themselves. I know that I've been in this industry now 2 decades, and there's always something that you're learning, and I think is extremely valuable to me. Being sometimes in an apprentice role, where I'm teaching somebody something, they're always showing me something back, or they're showing me something like, oh, this person has a different learning style, or there's different metaphors that I need to use to relay this information to. So it's both challenging, but also to me, I've always really enjoyed that aspect of this business. I'm sure there are other businesses that have this model in place, but I haven't experienced those. I can only speak for this industry. And I think that I've always enjoyed that. I've had a lot of people like yourself who thought you were up to snuff and put a little bit into you, or you have those phone calls like, yeah, hey kid, I'm nearing middle age, probably over the hill a little bit, but I still get called kid in some rooms. And sometimes you kind of bristle a little bit and you're like, hey man, I know what I'm doing here. Well, yeah, but there's a lot of humility that comes, from being around people who've been there, done that.
Yes, and with some sort of master that you're apprenticing under, I feel the harder they are on you, the better it is once you leave the nest. I specifically remember being in Lexington, Kentucky, on a gig rigging at Rupp Arena, and I showed up there and I was without my traveling partner who I'd been rigging with for the rest of this route that we'd been doing. And for the first time ever, I was at a venue that I didn't know, in a city that I didn't know, where I didn't know anybody. It was a little bit nerve-wracking, but I was just fine because I had been prepped for it.
So it's much like, a first responder situation where you're kind of just, you're parachuted out of an airplane and you just got to literally hit the ground and orient yourself to what's going on and find those people who are going to help you through that process.
And at some point, you have to live, learn, and pass on. You have to become that person that teaches other people, that isn't malicious in your selfishness towards your career.
Right.
As in, I get these, I have to take these. At some point, you have to become the mentor yourself.
That's interesting because I know that you've done, like, this is not your first time doing an interview like this. You've had opportunities to speak in college courses and things like that. So tell me a little bit about that process of moving from the mentee to the mentor.
Well, it's a little bit odd because I still see myself on most job sites as the kid, but I get people who were late teens about when I started who are coming up to me and they're asking me all of these things, and my initial reaction is, you're more of a peer to me than somebody under me, but I have to realize that and then roll with the role that I've become. And I have to put out of my mind all of the things that I know that they don't know these things, and be patient, be kind, which a lot of people in our industry are not, but be tough. Mm-hmm. People's lives are at stake if you mess up.
I know there's been times when you're put in that position of being the rule enforcer. I've been called a Boy Scout, laughed at, whatever. You have to be willing to speak up for yourself. Like, I call it trusting your spidey senses. If you see somebody doing something or you're asked to do something and you go, inside you go, something about that just doesn't feel right. You have the right to say, hey, this is not good. And in some ways you got to be willing to, at the very least get made fun of a little bit. At the very most, if it's an extremely unsafe situation and people are not really taking the safety precautions that they need to get the work done properly, you have to be willing to walk away and lose that money that day, or lose that relationship even.
Absolutely.
At the extreme,
And that's trust.
Right.
That's, again, between us as freelancers, which is the thing that we haven't been talking the most about in this, is that I trust you, you trust me. If you are booking me for a call, it means that either you have that trust in me or you trust somebody who has that in me. You know that I'm going to show up and I'm going to do it right. I'm going to do it safely. I'm going to take care of your people and get it done in both a timely, cost-effective, but most importantly, safe manner.
Right. So they either know of you personally and the work that you do, or you've been vouched for by someone else.
That's why we call this the brotherhood, because we have people who were in such close proximity to us in such dangerous situations for such long periods that we have a brotherly and sisterly relationship with them.
Yeah, it feels like
often
family.
like family.
Yeah. We've touched on this a little bit, but it may be hard to narrow down to just one, but you've worked probably thousands of events, but is there any event or a particular challenge that you had at an event professionally that is kind of memorable to you, how you resolved it, whether it was a people thing or a safety thing, or just, how the heck am I supposed to hang this in this situation? Narrow something down for me, or give me a little antidote.
Okay, so for Taylor Swift's Reputation tour, when it came to Atlanta, it was a massive show that had more points than I could count, at higher than I had been, and often you had to hang off of the structure and had to be safe off of that, create your own safety, rather than having a built-in safety line. And I think that being able to climb truss, hang off of it, rig from it, rig to it, being able to rappel when needed, that was one of the first times that I had to incorporate multiple styles of skill sets. And I had to hang a shiv at certain points because I couldn't get certain things to the air from where I was at. I had to hang upside down, and all at over 100 feet.
It's unbelievable.
And a new stadium. Well, newish.
Right. So new venue.
New venue. And there are a lot of the older venues in which you'll find yourself crawling in a dark space with very thin beams, going over curves and different things, and trying to figure out how you can hang this one thing here. And your travel path is more difficult than the actual job itself. Is how do I get there?
Right. Yeah. Do you ever look back and go, wow, I'm hanging this point for this one effect that's going to last 10 seconds in a show? Is it really worth it?
I don't know if I've had the thought of is it worth it for the show. I've had the thought many times, is it worth it for the money? And
Gotcha.
that's a decision, again, as a freelancer, that you have to make. Is, I've done this before for this money. Is this worth my time?
Dovetailing off that a little bit, now that we've kind of opened up the financial part of this, you can make a good living out of doing this.
Yes.
When things are rolling. I know we'll talk about the impact of the situation we're in right now with this pandemic, but we've sat down and chatted before too. When you're in that chitlin circuit, you're just kind of in that beginning phase of your career. You'll do things for a certain amount of pay for the sheer exposure and to get the experience. Talk to me a little bit about that progression for you. What's that been like? How have you determined, because as a freelancer, you know, there's what you feel like you're worth, and then there's what the industry and the location will bear. Talk to me a little bit about the financial piece and how you make those decisions.
So this is what I feel like makes a good business agent, also makes a good traveling rigger, is that you become aware of all the different spaces, how many people that they have, what do they pay, and who's closest to them. And when you're learning that, you start to write it down, and you can figure out on your route how you can make the most money, but also how you can maintain your reputation, because a venue's only going to call you back so many times. You have to hit it occasionally for them not to forget about you.
Yeah.
And so a good business agent is going to have the same thing. They're going to say, this city that is near me has this gig and they need this many people. So I'm going to call in my call steward, which often is the same person, but let's pretend like it's another one. I'm going to call in my call steward to hire these people, assuming that they don't have a rotation of A, B, and C lists. A and B is comprised of the people that are the most skilled. C is the people who are coming up, which is where you start. And you have to push through the C list by taking more gigs, being proficient at those gigs, and making a good name for both the company that you're working for, the union, and a good name for yourself. So while a good business agent is doing that, you as an individual, as a freelancer, should be as well. You should be able to not only do the gig, but if they're having a hard time filling it, you should know the people that are in that travel route that are near that city that can come by. That's often a lifesaver for a production company, is to
Right.
be able to fill the call.
Right,
Because-
because there's a certain number of people that are being asked to do the job proficiently, and it's a finite amount of people who can do that within a given geography.
Prior to this year, the demand has been far greater than the supply. And so you can almost pick and choose where, when, and how you want to be on a gig. So as you move along, you're just trucking along gig to gig to gig to gig. Even if you don't know it, you're building up a reputation in one way or the other. And the better it is, the more you get called. And you have to be really good with people skills as a freelancer. You have to be really good with, how do I talk to this person? How many times can I not show up to this city? You always want to show up to a gig, but how many times can they call me and me say I'm not available?
Before you fall out of their consciousness. Right?
Correct.
Yeah, there's quite a balancing act that's done there, and I think often in our training, because there's so much technical aspect to what we do, there's not a whole lot of, I guess, formality to the way we learn those things. We all have different talents and different exposure to people, but it's very much an industry, especially if you're going to be a freelancer. You're in business for yourself. You're a sole proprietor. What you're selling is your ability. And like you said, there's a strategy. I know you've sat down with me and showed me, like, geographically and even venue by venue, you've gone, I know I'm going to be traveling on this circuit. I'm going to be in this area of the country. When I get these calls, I know that these venues are within a certain mileage, that if I got that call, I can make that determination on the fly and go, yeah, I'll go bail that person out, help them out, get that rig up, and then come back over and finish, out.
And more importantly, can I work my way home? Because you don't want to be stuck in Miami 14 hours away from home and have no gig in between. I know that from experience.
So you've worked your way down to a point, and then you want work all the way back. Very much like I guess like a line haul truck driver would be. It's like, I don't ever want my trailer to be empty. if I'm putting miles on the road, I want to be getting paid for those miles.
Now I'm doing a lot less of that these days. I'm more centralized and more home.
Right.
Not just because of the events of this year, but I was trying to do that anyways. And I all of this to say that the traveling route can be fun. It's a good way to get your name out there and get a lot of experience very quickly. It'll be a lot quicker than, being in one venue that has 15 shows a year. You can go out on the road and do 300 shows a year.
Wow.
You can work normally any day that you want to. You have to schedule your own days off.
Yeah, as much or as little as you want.
Correct. So
You talked a little bit about, you referred to some positions like union steward or call steward, things like that, and you talked about the union. For people who are not familiar with this industry at all, there are specific unions that are specific to what we do. And talk to me a little bit about working between. There has to be, in any given room, there's going to be multiple entities that are that are responsible for different aspects of the show. So sometimes you walk in the door as a freelancer, there may be 3 or 4 layers of people in the room, and just knowing what you're responsible for and to whom you report is pretty important. Talk to me a little bit about the IATSE unions. Explain to me who they are, that kind of thing, just for the benefit of the listening audience.
IATSE, IATSE is the production union that most of us operate off of for stage and film. The chapter that I'm in is stage, but we do some crossover here and there for TV, film, commercials, things like that. Generally, on almost any film gig, you'll see those fellas there, and a lot of stage ones. Although the South is a little bit different, you'll have more of a combination. Yeah, union is ever present in what we do, and even if you have those multiple layers that you're talking about, where there's a video company that's here, there's an audio company that's here, you'll still generally have union hands that are there in some kind of capacity.
And I've worked. I've never had the opportunity to be a part of a stage union, but I've worked a lot with unions, and then I've worked again on my own of obviously working for a venue. It's easy to develop attitudes about certain groups of people. While we're sort of talking about the people aspect of this, tell me what that's like. Like, has there been a situation where, you've been on a call and there was something people-wise that needed to be resolved? How did you deal with that?
There's a little bit of resentment down here about union stagehands. Sometimes it's that they're making more. Sometimes it's the conditions and everything. My opinion on it is whatever is the best benefit for the person being involved. Generally, that is union. Generally, union has some kind of protection so that you don't have to resolve that issue yourself, so that you have some sort of representation that can resolve it for you, both legally, health-wise, or anything else you're gonna have a business agent that does represent you. Now, you may have some individual disagreements of, somebody who didn't like the way that you work, didn't like you, something like that, and that's just a blockade that comes with people skills. Can I diffuse that? Can I make this client that's unhappy about something that's out of my control, can I reassure them?
Mm.
So you have to have a bit of professionalism about you.
Yeah, fair
At
amount of
all
discernment
times.
about what's going on, and like knowing when I can diffuse that situation personally, and when I felt like I've exhausted all the things that are in my tool bag. It's nice to have that layer of protection. I know also with the unions, they offer a good bit of training. A lot of you're paying your dues, and like you said, there's legal things, there's things like guaranteed amount of pay, or standard amount of hours, or making sure people get breaks. I mean, we're talking about Everything is about that curtain dropping at that certain time. We're not always working straight 8-hour days with a nice little 30-minute lunch and two 15-minute breaks in the morning and the afternoon.
Doesn't always start at
Our world
9.
looks totally different. We can be on a call at 5 o'clock in the morning, starting, roll that clock over 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 hours, come right back the next day. So yeah, there's a lot that I think in this industry deal with that is not atypical to what people would think of as a standard work day.
And you always want to be aware of those conditions when those hours start rolling of can I still be safe in here? But also, am I getting treated right? Is this worth my time?
Right.
And when do I set the cutoff? When do I pull back? For me personally.
Right. Knowing what your personal limits are in terms of, have I reached my daily limit, like of effectiveness and what I can do and feel like that I'm cognitively aware and physically aware enough to where I'm not going to injure myself or somebody else and I can get the job done. We've alluded to it a little bit throughout this conversation. It's been absolutely awesome to have you here. I hope that some of the things that you shared are impactful to people. The elephant in the room, the 500-pound canary, is the COVID pandemic has had an enormous impact on our business and is still continuing to have a lingering impact. Talk to me a little bit about how it's impacted you personally, and then some of the things you've done to sort of shift your skill set and maybe market yourself a little bit differently, or what opportunities are there still out there for somebody that has your set of skills?
Unfortunately, there's been a lot of loss for me personally and a lot of others around us, whether, financially or emotionally or whatever. So that has been occurring en masse, but the first little bit of this has been trying for all of us. We all sat around and we all got in a state of one way or another. But things are slowly coming back. You're starting to see some film work come back, some commercials. Last week, I did a drive-in concert series over at Verizon, of which they had, something to 300 to 400 parking spaces to where people could pull in, tune their radio to the stage, which was happening, and we could all do it in a safe manner with masks, with distancing, with everything that we needed to stay safe from the new danger and still put out a production. And despite what happens in the future, I think that we all have some kind of ingenuity to where we'll figure out how to make it happen.
Yeah.
We all have been through trying times of one way or another. This is a new type of trying, and we'll figure it out. I've personally gone through a lot during this, and I'm probably better for it coming out on the other side.
Yeah, I know that you've been always very candid with me. As we're sort of wrapping up here, if you could give one piece of advice to that young person or that person that's unhappy or dissatisfied in their career, and they're listening to you talk and they're going, hey, that sounds adventurous. I think I could actually do that. Do you have a word of wisdom that you would pass out to them?
I would say go to whatever local facility that you have that does productions and just talk to somebody to see how you can get in. It may not be available currently, but if you bug somebody enough, you could probably get on a show being a truck loader, being a hand, being some small position, and you can work your way up with or without education. Education is obviously it puts you higher up on the stepping stones.
But not always. I think there's a lot to be said about, what are you willing to do, and just getting your body in the room where work is happening and being exposed to things like, I can remember the first time, learning about audio. You don't know what an XLR cable is. You don't know the difference between a cardioid or, pattern or a dynamic mic versus a condenser mic, or a lens for an ellipsoidal or a Fresnel or something like that. But all that language and all those things, it's just about exposure and seeing those things over and over and over again. And like you said, some of that tough love, you know, I just found great value in that. Like, I can't say enough, like, as we wrap up here, to me, I had the opportunity to go to school and learn some things, and I think that was extremely valuable. When I got out of school and I started getting out into the industry, not only did I find out that there was a lot that you just can't pack into a classroom, that but that was okay that they couldn't. That getting exposed to those things in the real world scenario actually solidified that learning for me. You gotta F it up a few times. You gotta mess some things up a few times, and you learn. Roll that cable wrong. Set that mic to the wrong pattern, or don't unplug a cable while you're wiring it up and get bit.
A couple of those are almost a rite of passage to mess some traditional things like that up, like rolling a cable wrong.
Right. So, well, I mean, it's been awesome having you here. I know we could go on for a long time, but it's been an absolute joy. Again, Joe Meadows, to me, one of the just finest AV people that I know, just an absolute stand-up guy, one of the most fun people you ever be around. I've learned a lot working with you two, and have a mad amount of respect for somebody who can go up and do the crazy things that you do. Always getting high on the job.
Well, I appreciate you, Stephen. I appreciate the Morton. I appreciate the crew here, Asher, and everybody for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a joy. Hope to have you back. Again, Joe Meadows, Arena Rigger. I hope you've enjoyed this edition or session of the Morton Green Room.